Alors, bonjour à tous, bon après-midi, hello to all. Thank you for being here this afternoon. So we are here today to present a panel on women in science. Is it still a challenge today? Est-ce encore un défi aujourd'hui? Certains pourraient penser que non, mais quand on s'est penché sur la question, on a découvert que oui. Donc, en fait, la Fondation L'Oréal a présenté en septembre dernier une étude qui a été réalisée en collaboration avec Opinionway en Europe, qui, en fait, essayait de comprendre les disparités qui touchaient les femmes dans les domaines scientifiques et surtout d'essayer de comprendre quels étaient les freins pour leur évolution professionnelle. So the study was actually conducted with more than 5,000 Europeans in France, Great Britain, Germany, Spain, and Italy, and brought to light edifying results. We actually discovered that the goal is no longer to just convey messages, but to really change perceptions on women in science and really change the numbers. I have a little video, it's in English only, but it really will show you the key highlight results of the study, and you will see why we were inspired after seeing those results to actually have the panel today. So we're ready for the video.
Only 30% of researchers in the world are women, and only 3% of Nobel Prizes in the sciences have been awarded to women. Today, the L'Oréal Foundation reveals the prejudices and the obstacles faced by women who follow a scientific career. There are 3 striking findings. First observation: prejudices live on. Only 10% of people interviewed consider women to be suited to science. 67% of them think that women lack the necessary skills to be high-level scientists. Women are considered to lack what are seen to be the key competencies to reach the top. Second observation: a vast underestimation of the gender imbalance. Those interviewed think that 28% of the highest-level academic scientific positions are held by women, while in reality, they only represent 11% of them. When those interviewed were asked to cite 3 names of scientists who have made a big breakthrough, 71% of them named men and 33% named women, which is actually more than the current proportion of women in science. Third observation: society demands change. Between 2000 and 2010, the ratio of women in research has increased from 26 to 29%. 59% of people interviewed consider this evolution too slow. When made aware that only 3% of the scientific Nobel Prizes have been attributed to women, 63% of those interviewed said that they would like to see a fairer balance. Over the past 17 years, the L'Oréal Foundation has been proud to empower and support female excellence in a field where women should be better represented. To create a real change, we have to change perceptions, change the numbers, join the movement. Only 30% of research.
Donc, c'est à la lumière de ces résultats qu'on a eu l'idée de ce panel. Et cet après-midi, le panel sera animé par Madame Véronique Morin. Madame Morin travaille dans le domaine de la radio, de la télévision et des magazines comme journaliste scientifique et comme productrice. Ses convictions, son dévouement et ses connaissances profondes des enjeux en journalisme scientifique l'ont menée à la présidence, entre autres, de l'Association canadienne des rédacteurs scientifiques, à la présidence de la Fédération canadienne, la Fédération mondiale des journalistes scientifiques et à la coprésidence de la 4e conférence mondiale des journalistes scientifiques tenue à Montréal en 2004. Madame Morin est une Fellow Southern en journalisme du Collège Massey de l'Université de Toronto. Elle collabore également régulièrement à l'émission Le Code Chastenay à Télé-Québec et elle nous présentera les 5 panélistes qui amorceront la discussion. Mais tout d'abord, j'aimerais inviter un partenaire précieux du programme, Dr. Offray, à venir dire quelques mots de l'Ambassade de France. Merci.
Merci Virginie. So, dear panelists, dear Véronique Morin, dear Virginie, dear guests. My name is Jean-Christophe Offray. I'm the scientific counselor at the French Embassy, and it is a great pleasure for me to be here with you today. I would like to associate to the upcoming panelists some young, talented women in science who will be awarded for the 2015 by the Foundation L'Oréal for Women in Science. Leur prix leur sera remis ce soir à l'occasion d'une soirée sur les femmes et la science à l'Ambassade de France ici à Ottawa. Je laisserai donc le soin à Véronique de présenter tout à l'heure le docteur Soichet, qui a reçu le Grand Prix d'Amérique du Nord à Paris en 2015. Et je voudrais maintenant donc présenter les lauréates pour les prix qui leur seront attribués ce soir à l'ambassade. So I invite you to stand when I call your name, please, young ladies. So the 2015 L'Oréal UNESCO Excellence in Research Fellowships were awarded to Dr. Alicia Gazeka. Alicia. Alicia, après un master à l'université de Potsdam en Pologne, a reçu une bourse Marie Curie et a suivi la même route que son illustre compatriote qui l'a conduite en France. Elle a donc passé sa thèse à l'université d'Aix-Marseille. Elle est aujourd'hui postdoc à l'université de Laval et travaille au développement de nouvelles modalités d'imagerie optique in vivo du cerveau et de la moelle épinière, en particulier pour l'étude de la sclérose en plaques. Bravo à vous, Alicia. L'autre prix est attribué au docteur Catherine Hargan. Catherine, bravo. So, Catherine is a W. Garfield Weston postdoctoral fellow for Northern Research at the University of Ottawa, after having completed a Master in Science from Trent University and a PhD from Queen's University. Her postdoctoral research in the Canadian Arctic is aimed to better understand the biotic and abiotic role in the transfer and concentration of contaminants and heavy metals to coastal sites and explain how climate change could influence this transfer. Am I right? Okay, thank you very much, Catherine. The L'Oréal UNESCO for Women and Science ENCORE Postdoctoral Fellowship Supplement has been awarded to Dr. Michel Annette. Michel, qui après avoir obtenu un doctorat à l'université d'Alberta, est aujourd'hui postdoc du CRSNG à l'université de Toronto dans le domaine de l'interaction personne-machine. Elle poursuit ses recherches au laboratoire DGP, de Dynamics Graphics Project, et est également dans le groupe d'interface utilisateur chez Autodesk Research. Bravo à vous, Michel. Finally, the L'Oréal France-Canada Research Fund Fellowships are awarded to PhD students. This year, the fellowships were given to Miss Megan Megan is a senior PhD student in the Department of Human Genetics at McGill University. Using a forward genomic approach, her research focuses on identifying and studying host genes controlling the outcome of Salmonella infection. Bravo, Megan. And so the second L'Oréal FCRF fellowship was awarded to Miss Nashin Sadiq. Yes, it's a surprise. So Nashin is currently in a final year of a PhD at the Department of Chemistry at Queen's University. She works on food safety analysis using inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry and optical emission spectrometry. Is that right? Excellent. Thank you very much, Nashin. So, un grand bravo à chacune de vous. Il ne fait nul doute que vous saurez chacune dans vos recherches braver tous les préjugés qui pèsent encore sur l'impact et sur le rôle des femmes en sciences. Merci beaucoup et je donne maintenant la parole à Véronique.
Parmi vous. Merci. Alors, je suis très heureuse. J'ai fait le voyage de Montréal. Bon, c'est pas si loin, mais on était un peu dans une mini-tempête ce matin. Alors, je suis contente que finalement la route était belle et le public est beau aussi. Et je suis certaine que nous aurons des questions excellentes et que nous allons trouver des solutions pour nous permettre d'avancer et de faire changer ces chiffres qui demeurent. Lorsque j'ai commencé il y a 30 ans comme journaliste scientifique, on nous disait tout est égal, tout est dans le même poids, tout est en équilibre. Mais à mesure qu'on avance, on ne sait pas pourquoi, il y a comme une espèce de mouvance, on avance, on recule. Et puis aujourd'hui, on a 4 super rôles modèles in sciences that will come and tell us their experience, the reasons why they decided to choose a career in science. They will share with us their path, the difficulty, the challenges. Maybe it was easy. I doubt. I'm sure that there were some hurdles along the way, and together we'll talk about perception, attitude, which are very important to be aware of. And so we will have half an hour for your questions, so please get ready. But first we'd like to hear from each of our panelists, and I will present them, and each of them will tell their stories. Molly Choiquette is joining us. Bonjour, Molly. So Dr. Molly Choiquette holds the Thiers Canada Research Chair in Tissue Engineering, and she is University Professor of Chemical Engineering and Applied Chemistry and Biomaterials and Biomedical Engineering at the University of Toronto. She is an expert in the study of polymers, les plastiques, for drug delivery and regeneration, which are materials that promote healing in the body. Dr. Choiquette has published over 480 papers, patents, and abstracts, and she's foreseen the graduation of 310 students, 134 students. Let's not change the numbers as far as her credentials are. So she founded 2 spin-off companies from research in her lab, so she also has a business experience. And Dr. Choiquette is the recipient, as Monsieur Jean-Christophe a dit, of many prestigious distinctions, and the only person to be a fellow of Canada's 3 national academies: Canadian Academy of Science of the Royal Society of Canada, Canadian Academy of Engineering, and Canadian Academy of Health Sciences. Dr. Choiquette won also the L'Oréal UNESCO for Women in Science Award for North America this year in 2015, past year. Dr. Choiquette holds the Order of Ontario, Ontario's highest honor, and is a fellow of the American Association, the AAAS, American Association for the Advancement of Science. In 2013, her contributions to Canada's innovation agenda and the advancement of knowledge were recognized with the QE2 Diamond Jubilee Award. And in 2014, she was given the University of Toronto's highest distinction, University Professor, a distinction held by less than 2% of the faculty. Please welcome Dr. Molly Choiquette.
Well, it's really a pleasure to be here, and I just wanted to clarify, we're giving questions to answer. Did you want to talk about those now, or just about a little bit of the journey?
I'd like to, I think we'd like to hear your journey, if possible, in a few minutes. Tell us what led you to the path of a career in science.
Okay. So let's start at the beginning. I was a young girl, as of course that's where I would start at the beginning, and very stubborn and very determined. One of my earliest memories is asking, my mom and dad if I could go swimming, and them saying, no, absolutely not, and then going swimming anyway. And of course I got in a lot of trouble for that, but at that very earliest memory is, one of obstinacy and determination, and maybe not following the rules. Through my years, when I was a little older, in fact, I was talking with my mom yesterday about this. I came home and said, Mom, when I grow up, I figured it out. I remember being really nervous as a little kid because it seemed like everybody else knew what they were going to be when they grew up, and I had no idea. So I was very excited one day when I figured it out, and I came home and I said, Mom, I'm going to be a nurse. And she said, that's fantastic. But why don't you consider being a doctor? That's another alternative. And I was like, no, 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 no. My friends told me that girls cannot be doctors. And so this is something that wasn't my own memory, that was my mom's memory, and so thank goodness for not remembering everything, because I always thought that I did want to be a doctor. And I think the way my mom combated that early notion for me was I then had a female pediatrician, and so I had a role model who was a doctor, someone that I respected, and then I remember for the longest time wanting to be a medical doctor. And I also just remember being good at chemistry and math, and really being encouraged by my family and my school to pursue what I was good at. So when I went to university, I decided just to study chemistry. And I liked, looking back on it, it was a great degree for me to get because for me, it was something that I loved to do, and so I was willing to spend time doing it, and then I would get better at it. And that's the advice that I give my own children as well. If you like something, you should really pursue it and spend more time getting good at it. But there I was graduating from MIT with a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry, and facing my parents and saying, I'm not going to go to medical school. And this was what I thought, and they thought I was going to be doing for a long time. And when I was at MIT, my eyes were opened up to the world of research. And I decided to pursue a PhD in a field called polymer science and engineering. And when I got my PhD, I remember my dad saying to me, okay, so now are you going to go to medical school? Because he hadn't quite let go of that dream. But, I think I've had the benefit of living in Canada, and the benefit of opportunity, and the benefit of a support system that really said no to the stereotypes and encouraged me to pursue what I loved. And I feel very grateful for my family and for this country supporting women and supporting that passion that I had. And so I won't go through all the gory details, but I worked in industry for a number of years, 3 years, and then was in the U.S. and then came back to Canada and have been here now for 20 years and have been really, I think I was really lucky. I happened to work in this field of regenerative medicine, which has just exploded over the past 30 years. And so I found myself at the beginning of a field that was growing and developing, and it gave me the opportunity coming into a field that's led by medicine, but come into that from an engineering perspective. And I've had a lot of fun with innovation and working with fantastic people at university. And yes, there have been a lot of struggles, but I'm the glasses half full person, and so I tend to forget a lot of the struggles and really try and focus on moving forward and changing people's perception of research, changing people's perception of what a scientist looks like. And maybe I'll stop there, because otherwise I'll take up the whole panel.
Great. We'll come back to the challenges and the gory detail you didn't want to give us earlier. Now I'd like to introduce you to Ruby Heap. Ruby Heap is a full professor in the Department of History and is currently Associate Vice President Research at the University of Ottawa. She previously served as Associate Dean of the Faculty of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies and as founding director of the Institute of Women's Studies. She is the University of Ottawa's designated Shirk leader, as well as the university's representative at the Canadian Federation for the Humanities and Social Sciences. Her research on the history of women in science and engineering in the 20th century has led to a Canada-US Fulbright Fellowship in 2009, and to her recent appointment as chair of the research committee of the INWES, International Network of Women Engineers and Scientists Education and Research Institute. Her fields of interest are history of women, history of education, history of the profession in Canada, 19th and 20th century. So she will help us bring some perspective on our panel. Welcome, Ruby Heap, please.
Thank you very much. So, as you may realize, I'm not a scientist by definition, but my story is that I attended a convent in Quebec, and I wanted to be an engineer. But the nuns told me at that time, no, it's not a profession fit for young women. Why don't you go into the humanities? So that led to history. But I had my revenge in the sense that I've been working with great women engineers for almost more than a decade now, and they have taught me a lot of great things, including trying to be more concise, because historians like to talk a lot. So I will try to do my best to tell you a little bit of the history of women engineering in Canada in less than 10 minutes. Alors, je vais faire la présentation en anglais, mais évidemment, je serai tout à fait disposée à répondre aux questions en français. Alors, let's go back to the mid-century, the mid-20th century, and I'll try to bring you very quickly to the more recent decades and show you, talk about some of the key historical milestones that have marked the women in science and engineering landscape in Canada since the 1950s, and to look very quickly at those policies and efforts that aimed at improving the status of women in science and engineering. I will focus mainly on engineering, which is my area of expertise, although many of the observations I will make apply or can apply to both fields. I've avoided to giving you detailed statistics because I wanted to make sufficient room for insights on the ongoing evolution of the situation of women scientists and engineers. So what did it mean, really, in a few words, to be a women engineer and scientist in the 1950s and 60s? Well, first of all, you were mostly invisible in official statistics. Okay, try to find them. It was very difficult because, of course, of their very low number. And if you were a women engineer, you were not even accounted for because you represented less than 1% of the total female labor force. So you read the reports and they say, oh, we don't even bother talking about women engineering. They're almost non-existent. Language is also key. Women in science and engineering were indeed made invisible by the use of the term manpower. Remember manpower? Okay? And this was the term that was used by the government and the experts, mostly economists, it hired to examine the state of the labor market. At the same time, and this is what is so interesting, those odd few girls who enrolled in university programs in science and engineering did not go unnoticed on campuses. This was especially the case in engineering, where the admission of a handful of girls was consistently described as an invasion of schools of engineering. And the press was quite keen in coming at U of T, for example, during that time, taking pictures of 5 girls and saying, U of T Faculty of Engineering is invaded by women. So this is what it used to be like. Now, there were major turning points in the 1970s and the 1980s that help us explain the changes in the situation of women in engineering in the last 3 or 4 decades. Young women started to increasingly enroll in university science and engineering programs, and the statistics, I'm not going to give any precise ones, clearly demonstrate that upright trend. And why is that so? 3 main factors help to explain this. More and more girls were attending high school and were seeking paid work. They wanted to find good jobs. The emergence and the rapid growth of the women's movement in Canada is also a very important factor. It urged girls not to limit their career choice to one of the few lower paying and lower status, and I quote, female occupations like nursing, for example, and being a secretary. It also successfully called for laws to eliminate gender discrimination and achieve equity in the workplace. And basically what they were saying, the feminists of the time, women should have full and complete access to the male-dominated profession, including engineering. So the federal government also started to identify what it called at the time the problem, quote unquote, of the underrepresentation of women in science and engineering as a very serious problem, and it called for measures to increase the numbers of women in order to reinforce Canada's skilled labor force. I call this the business case for women in science and engineering. We need them because we need skilled members of our labor force to compete globally. Now, this favorable context will foster an impressive organizational drive within the community of women scientists and engineers under the leadership and with the encouragement of trailblazers, and I call them also gender benders, such as Elsie Gregory McGill, Ursula Franklin, Claudette McKay-Lasson, and Margaret Ann Armour, amongst many others. And I have a deep admiration for these women, I must confess. Several organizations were established at the time across Canada, such as WISE, which still exists, and CC West, which also still exists. And what were the main goals of these organizations? According to Claudette Lasson, which was one of the leaders of the time, it was the time to reassess, and I quote her, women's positions within organizations. In the case of engineers, they were seeking, and remember what we're talking about today as compared to that time. I'm talking about the late 70s, early 1980. Full access to the profession, the elimination of sexism and discriminatory practices, the promotion of women to positions of authority, and finally, the celebration of their contributions. But what's interesting is they insisted on the fact that there had to be recognition that women could do engineering as well as men. And Lasson was particularly committed to eliminating the profession's hard hat image, which linked engineering to the male domain. And this is why Lasson and her colleagues promoted at the time female role models who were not only successful engineers, but also wives and mothers. They wanted to show that women engineers could also, of course, have kids and be wives, not just engineers as, you know, the image of the engineer was projected. Now, if we enter the 1990s and beyond, you will remember or recall that the 1980s unfortunately ended with the Montreal massacre at the L'École Polytechnique de Montréal. This strategy is important because it also marks a significant historical moment because it propelled the problem of women in science and engineering in the public arena, creating a new level of interest in the special challenges women faced and leading to renewed and increased efforts to improve their status on university campuses and beyond. Now, the 1990s were also marked by a major paradigm shift with respect to the solutions envisaged to solve this persisting problem. This shift was clearly articulated in the seminal report, More Than Just Numbers, submitted in 1992 by the Canadian Committee on Women Engineering, presided by Monique Fries, who taught here at university for many, many years and also at Carleton, and was an NSERC chairholder. The report's title strongly suggested that attracting greater numbers of women in the educational and professional pipeline was no longer sufficient to change the status quo. What was now needed was to uncover the social and cultural barriers responsible for their underrepresentation and to ensure that, I quote, that the learning and working environments welcome, support, and appreciate women engineering students and engineers. In other words, you needed to fix the institutions and make them more women-friendly as opposed to preparing women to adapt to the dominant masculine cultures of science and engineering. This meant, amongst other things, an open discussion about the chilly climate and about sexism and bias in these fields. Now, this call for what I call and others call institutional transformation will have a major impact in the years to come. In 1996, for example, NSERC just asked women to participate in the development, and I quote, of a broader science culture in Canada. One major step in that direction was the creation the following year of 5 regional chairs for women in science and engineering. Now, Catherine, sitting next to me, is one of the chairholders. We'll discuss her mandate and initiatives, but I will mention that the overall objective of the new chairs program at the time was to increase the enrollment of women in undergraduate and graduate programs in science and engineering and provide role models for women active in or considering careers in these fields. Now, the chair programs will have several key outcomes following its establishment, including a second wave of organizational drive. And je veux mentionner qu'un impact important, c'est qu'on va voir une des titulaires des chaires CRNCNG, Claire Deschaines, créer une association très importante pour les femmes ingénieures scientifiques francophones au Canada, qui porte le nom de l'AFESTIM, c'est un nom très long. L'Association de la francophonie à propos des femmes en sciences, technologie, ingénierie, mathématiques, mais c'était quand même un moment très important dans l'histoire du regroupement des femmes en sciences et génie au Canada. Now, so to end, where are we now? That's what I was being asked also. What has improved over time and what are some of the current challenges facing the women in science, in the science and engineering community? Now, I was thinking about this as a historian, and I can certainly attest to the positive changes in their situation and status since the mid-20th century. Let's just consider female engineering students. They have gone from exclusion and marginalization, when I started, go back to the 1940s and 50s, to inclusion. From invisibility to high-profile presence. In many of the faculty's websites, you just have to look and you'll see girls doing all sorts of exciting things. They have a profile. They no longer need to fight to invade formerly all-male enclaves. At schools that were formerly filled and controlled by men, there is now a wide range of support programs for female undergraduate and graduate students and for female faculty in engineering. In short, how women moved into a male territory, transforming along the way the social, institutional, and cultural nature of Canadian engineering constitutes, in my opinion, a fascinating tale. At the same time, and I'm thinking of what I just heard before we began, biases, discriminatory practices, and sexual harassment still linger on campuses, a situation to which academic institutions and women in science and engineering organizations must devote considerable attention. There are also deeply ingrained gender issues that end up discouraging girls from pursuing a career in a non-traditional field such as engineering. For example, a report published in 2011 in a symposium called CCWE Plus 20 reported a persisting range of stereotypes linked to engineering that were shared by parents, high school students, and even more troubling, by guidance counselors. This sad state of affairs is largely the result of a lack of proper information on engineers and on what they do, which explains the impressive amount of outreach performed by engineering schools and women in science and engineering organizations to explain the field to young girls in elementary and high schools. More particularly, efforts are made to convince them that engineering is a socially relevant profession and that it can build a better world through technology. Think of Engineers Without Borders, for example. That is a good example that is giving now. Now, attracting more women into engineering, but also into science, does remain an important challenge. Numbers are still a problem in the university classroom. But let's remember that these numbers also vary from one subdiscipline to another. It's not all equal. Over the years, we just noticed an increase in targeted efforts to attract and retain young women in those areas where they were largely underrepresented, such as computer science and physics. But the numbers problem also concerns women faculty in science and engineering. In this case, there are two main issues to consider, and Catherine and Mona may refer to that. I'm just summarizing here. Overall, their representation in Canadian universities is much lower than the representation of women faculty in the social sciences, for example, humanities and education. And secondly, there's also an overall shortage of women in the highest rank of academia as full professors in leadership positions, such as university president. A new level of awareness about the special challenges faced by female faculty in science and engineering was recently triggered by the publication in 2012 of the Council of Canadian Academies report, Strengthening Canada's Research Capacity, the Gender Dimension. Significantly, some 20 years after the publication of the report, More Than Just Numbers, the CCA report insisted on, I quote, the importance of continued institutional transformation to ensure equity. In conclusion, then, clearly, while we can witness significant improvements in the general trajectory of women scientists and engineers during the past half-century, the problem of women in science and engineering remains a persistent one. In many ways, it has also become more complex and therefore more challenging to resolve. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. Thank you very much. Now, I'd like you to listen to Catherine Mavropoulos. Am I pronouncing your name well? Mavropoulos. She's the NSERC Pratt & Whitney Canada Chair for Women in Science and Engineering and Associate Professor at the University of Ottawa. Professor Mavropoulos graduated from McGill University's Honours Mechanical Engineering program and continued her studies at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Aeronautics and Applied Mathematics, where she earned her Master's of Science and her PhD degrees. After a postdoctoral appointment at Princeton University in the program for Applied and Computational Mathematics, she began her tenure-track career at George Washington University, where she earned her tenure. She spent 2 years as a program manager in applied and computational mathematics at the U.S. National Science Foundation, as a research fellow in the Cooperative Institute for Mesoscale Meteorological Studies at the University of Oklahoma. She worked with the U.S. NOAA National Severe Storms Lab scientists to advance modeling techniques for numerical weather prediction. She recently joined the University of Ottawa in the Department of Mechanical Engineering, where she continues to pursue her interest in numerical methods and fluid dynamics. Please welcome Catherine Mavropoulos.
Merci. So thank you for coming to our panel today. Of course, I think you're expecting me to talk about my parcours, but Ruby has exploded all the issues. So there's all sorts of things going on in my head. But I will tell you a bit about my background. So I benefited from an excellent education from France, essentially at lycée Collège Marie de France in Montreal. So since we are hosted by the embassy, I want to mention that in France, mathematics is it. You know, it's the highest thing in the country. The highest prestige goes to mathematicians, and with good reason. They're excellent mathematicians, and I had an excellent education that way. In my last year of high school, I had 10 hours of math a week with an excellent teacher with 7 students. And so I just love mathematics, and as you could hear from my CV, I've been weaving my way through between math and engineering. But I have a father who's an engineer. So those of you who know what I'm talking about, engineers always want everybody else to become engineers. And engineering is also a very respected profession in Europe, much more so than here, I would say. So although I love mathematics and wanted to go into mathematics for studies, my father said, no, you're going to engineering. So that's what I did. And I was heavily influenced, obviously, by him because he worked at Canadair, which is now Bombardier, for almost 50 years. And the development of the Challenger business jet and then all the derivatives, being the Global Express and all those airplanes that are now also being influencing the development of the C-Series, the newest aircraft, was started in those years when I was in high school and trying to decide what to do. So every night at the dinner table, we're talking about turbulence and winglets and all sorts of things, and politics as well as how it works in industry. So that's what I ended up doing, is going to McGill in mechanical engineering and then off to the States for a graduate degree. I did see a lot of difference between how I was treated or what the environment was like between Canada and the US. I find in Canada is much more reasonable. Perhaps it's because I went to MIT, which is an extremely stressful place to be, as Molly could probably tell you. And you end up with a lot of socially inadept people, and they're there because they're really brilliant, but they haven't worked on the other part of their lives, and so that's a little, not you, I'm just saying. It was really challenging. And then I stayed in the States for 25 years, as you heard from the summary of what I've been doing. So, and also I was lucky enough to be able to weave between the engineering and mathematics, as you heard. An interesting part of my career was working at the National Science Foundation, which is sort of the equivalent of ENCORE here in Canada. And for 2 years, I was a program manager in applied and computational mathematics. So I learned a lot about the funding situation, how peer review works, how we decide on a portfolio, how to invest your money across not only different research areas in a certain discipline, but also across the levels of researchers. So from graduate students to postdocs to professors just starting out their career to mid-career to full professors. I always like to tell a story about the day I turned down a very famous Russian mathematician on his 2-page proposal, how he said he was going to solve or prove the following theorem, and he had about just one paragraph about how he's going to do it. And I turned him down, and boy, that was a difficult phone call after that. But we have a process. I'm sure you have the same process at ENCORE, where you need to follow the procedures, follow the criteria for evaluation for proposals, and that's what I had to do. So I learned a lot about being in the government, and you see the flip side of things. It's not always easy. You don't get treated very well sometimes by famous mathematicians and other people. But it was an interesting time. Since I've been back in Ottawa, I'm on my 8th year, so I've enjoyed being back in the classroom teaching fluid dynamics, aerodynamics, computational methods. I've had the luxury also of having an NSERC chair for women in science and engineering. And that has been really an exciting program. I'm in my 5th year, it's almost over, which is kind of sad. But what we've been able to do is work on several levels of, I'd say, increasing the participation of girls and women in science and engineering. So there's what I call the recruitment stage, which is trying to get more girls interested in university programs, keeping the girls in the university programs, which I don't find to be such a problem because they're all, the ones who come in are usually self-selected and very motivated and do well. But I've been working mostly at the level of women professionals who've already been out there a number of years. So a lot of 5 to 7 year experienced people looking at career development, leadership development in not only industry. Well, I have a sponsor, it's Pratt & Whitney Canada, so I worked a lot within the company itself, but also across all sorts of industries, so focused on women in aerospace in some respect because of my background and because of the sponsor, but also women in computing. We have a huge conference happening on Friday night and Saturday this week called the Canadian Celebration of Women in Computing. We have 500 women coming and lots of sponsors who want to hire them, and they're going to hire them on the spot. So those are the types of events we run. And then we also have a research component. And so I have the honor of working with Ruby Heap, who you just heard about, with a student in history, looking at women in computer science. Since the beginning of this profession, oh, there she is, Jen Tiverge, looking at sort of how this profession developed. It developed so recently. Why is it so gendered already in just a few years? So that's a good question that Jen's looking at. I'm working with Anne Denis, who's also in the room here, and our student Victoria Austin, looking at sociology of women and mid-career engineers in industry. And also work with Donatil Mujawa Maria, who's not here, who's in education, looking at the influence of mothers on daughters' choices for studying science and engineering. And I've also worked with a great team of communications students, and they have helped me sort of form my message for the chair, which is always a positive one. So I'll tell you a bit more about that later, and there were some bookmarks out on the table if you want to look at the website and things like that.
Great. Thank you so much. I would like you now to welcome Mona Nemer. Elle est la vice-rectrice à la recherche et professeure à l'université ici d'Ottawa, au département de biochimie. Madame Nemer est détentrice d'un doctorat en chimie bio-organique de l'université McGill avant son arrivée à l'université d'Ottawa. Elle était professeure de pharmacologie à l'université de Montréal et directrice de l'unité de recherche en cardiologie moléculaire à l'Institut de recherche clinique de Montréal, l'IRCM, et titulaire de la chaire de recherche du Canada sur la différenciation des cellules cardiovasculaires, chaire de niveau 1. À l'IRCM, elle a également été directrice des affaires académiques et directrice exécutive de la planification et du développement. Les activités de recherche de Mme Nemer portent sur les mécanismes moléculaires du développement et du fonctionnement du cœur, particulièrement en ce qui a trait aux maladies cardiaques congénitales et à l'insuffisance cardiaque. Elle est reconnue, entre autres, pour ses travaux d'avant-garde portant sur la régulation des hormones natriurétiques cardiaques, ainsi que ses découvertes de plusieurs gènes qui sont essentiels au développement du cœur. Et à ce jour, elle a publié plus de 150 articles dans des revues scientifiques et des livres. Elle a aussi collaboré à l'organisation de nombreuses réunions scientifiques internationales. En plus de ses réalisations scientifiques, Mme Mona Nemer a toujours eu à cœur la formation de la relève et y a contribué tant par son mentorat d'étudiants diplômés et post-doctoraux que par ses nombreux services à la collectivité. Nous accueillons Mme Mona Nemer. Alors, votre parcours, il a été très facile, j'imagine.
Il a été très facile. Tout d'abord, je vais vous dire que je suis ravie de voir autant de jeunes femmes. De fait, ça m'intimide un peu. J'ai toujours peur de dire quelque chose qui va vous perturber ou qui va faire quelque chose de pas correct. Donc, je suis très nerveuse là. Ok, alors be easy on me. Mais non, j'aimerais aborder, peut-être illustrer quelques étapes de mon parcours pour montrer un peu à tout le monde que là, vous nous regardez ici toutes, puis vous dites « Ah, ça, c'est des femmes qui ont toujours su qu'est-ce qu'elles voulaient. Elles sont donc chanceuses. Moi, je suis là, je ne suis pas sûre ce que je veux faire dans la vie. Je ne suis pas sûre qu'est-ce qui m'intéresse, etc. » Et puis, trompez-vous, ok? C'est pas vrai qu'on a toujours su ce qu'on voulait. Moi, j'ai été dans une carrière scientifique, pas par défaut, mais de fait, quand j'étais à l'école, j'étais dans une école donc de filles, un lycée français, où les filles étaient destinées à des carrières en sciences sociales et humaines. Même pas des carrières, là. Juste étudier ça, c'est assez bon pour se marier. Donc, heureusement, je venais d'une famille un peu plus progressiste et puis on n'avait aucune pression pour se marier, donc je pouvais étudier ce que je voulais. Or, moi, ce qui m'intéressait, c'était l'histoire et la littérature. Mais j'adorais aussi les mathématiques. Donc, à un moment donné, donc, en classe de troisième ou de seconde, il faut faire un choix. Est-ce qu'on veut aller plus du côté de la littérature ou des sciences? Moi, je ne l'avais pas ce choix-là, ok? Parce qu'à l'école, il n'y avait que la voie littéraire. Et donc, moi, cette chose-là m'a beaucoup déplu. Et donc, je me suis mis en tête que j'allais aller en sciences, ainsi qu'un groupe de 17 autres filles, pour forcer l'école à créer un programme, une voie scientifique pour que les filles aient un choix. Alors évidemment, à partir du moment, puis je passe il y a eu des moments très intéressants dans tout ça, évidemment, des filles qui se plaignent contre la directrice, on se met à la porte, les parents doivent venir pour voir qu'est-ce qui se passe. Ma mère était enseignante, elle était horrifiée à l'idée que son enfant puisse être comme ça. Donc c'est mon père qui venait et qui donc me défendait mon droit de pouvoir étudier des mathématiques si je le voulais. Première chose intéressante. Alors, par la suite, donc, mes parents voulaient que je sois médecin. You know, they want me, hey, you're good at school, you go, you do medicine. Mais moi, je ne voulais pas aller en médecine. J'avais peur quand je voyais une goutte de sang et ça ne m'intéressait pas du tout d'aller en médecine. D'ailleurs, je n'étais pas bonne en biologie parce qu'il fallait apprendre par cœur et je n'avais pas de patience pour apprendre par cœur. Donc, j'ai fait un compromis avec mes parents. So I said, you want me to go into medicine? I don't want to go into medicine. So we're going to compromise. I'm going to go into pharmacy. Provided, so I was born and raised in Lebanon, provided I can go to the one university that teaches in English because I'm fed up with French. So that was the American University of Beirut. So they said, okay, fine. I applied to pharmacy. That year, the university decided to close pharmacy. Okay? So now I had to go somewhere. So I said, I'm not going to biology. You know, math, I wasn't so sure. If I want to only study math, I said, I'll go to chemistry. So basically, this is how I ended up in chemistry. So just to tell you that if you're not sure, you know, where you want to be, it doesn't really matter as long as you just enjoy the moment and get the best out of it. Okay? Donc par la suite, moi, j'ai fait mon doctorat en chimie à McGill. Et je vous raconte cette histoire pour que vous réalisiez que les acquis sont très fragiles. Alors, il y a 25 ans, à l'université McGill, il fallait se battre pour avoir une salle de bain pour les femmes, une par étage. OK? Parce que sinon, il fallait aller du 3e au 4e étage jusqu'au sous-sol pour aller aux toilettes des femmes. Il y avait une toilette pour les femmes au 3e étage qui était réservée pour les secrétaires. Il n'y avait aucun professeur femme au département de chimie de McGill où il y avait une 40aine de professeurs. Donc, aujourd'hui, je vous raconte ça, la plupart d'entre vous n'étiez pas nés. Vous regardez maintenant la situation, vous dites, il n'y a aucun problème. Mais faites attention, les acquis sont vraiment très, très, très fragiles. OK? Et enfin, je vous dirai, puis on pourra en discuter plus, qu'une des choses qui freine les femmes, souvent, c'est aussi le manque de confiance des femmes en elles-mêmes. Vous êtes meilleur que ce que vous pensez. Vous êtes meilleur que ce que vous pensez. Ne vous mettez pas des limites. Les gars ne se mettent pas de limites. Et puis, vous ne devriez vraiment pas le faire non plus. Alors, voilà ce que j'ai à dire.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, merci beaucoup d'avoir partagé votre parcours de façon aussi personnelle. Je pense que c'est important de le faire pour voir en perspective l'idée que le chemin parcouru n'est pas toujours, rose, n'est pas toujours facile non plus. J'aimerais revenir sur cette question de perception, du fait que, dans les années 90, 2000 même, on avait l'impression que c'était égal. Le nombre était 50% des femmes en biologie, les nombres augmentaient. Et puis tout à coup, il y a eu comme une espèce de chute au niveau de l'appui pour promouvoir les femmes en sciences au début des années 2000, je crois. Et là, ça s'est mis à stagner en 2000, surtout en ingénierie, où on a comme plafonné autour de 11-13%, puis ça bougeait plus. Et j'aimerais avoir votre réflexion là-dessus. Est-ce que comment cette perception, ce problème alors qu'on croit que tout est maintenant acquis, comment ça joue justement contre l'avancement des aspirations des femmes dans un domaine qui est bénéfique à la société en entier? Allez-y comme vous le voulez, Mona. Would you like me to translate?
No.
Good. Okay.
I graduated from the Toronto French School in Toronto, and they would be very happy to know that I still understand. Je comprends toujours le français, mais je ne parle pas très bien. So I'll speak in English. Oui. So, I think in 2005, the president of Harvard University, Lawrence Summers, wondered out loud why there weren't more female tenured professors at Harvard, and then asserted out loud that it was due to innate differences between men and women. last year in 2015, Tim Hunt, a Nobel laureate from the UK, said, probably he was trying to be funny because the British have that quirky sense of humor, but said out loud, you know, women are a distraction in the lab. And so, you know, I think the blatant bias against women has gone away, but we still are left with social and cultural biases. And, you know, sometimes, you know, well, for sure we've come a long way, right? We have the statistics to support that. But really, if we want to go further, society as a whole, I think, has to change. And it's not just men who have to change, women have to change too. Because after all, we are all living in the same society and we are all affected by the same biases. I had the pleasure of listening to Eileen Polak. She's a professor at the University of Michigan, and she was just speaking on Quirks and Quarks on CBC Radio over the weekend. And she wrote a book called The Only Woman in the Room, reflecting on her experiences as being the only female physics student at Yale University among 118 men, and now she is a professor of English at the University of Michigan, even though she got her undergraduate degree in physics. And so she talks about the importance of awareness, first of all, and the importance of changing the system, and, you know, kind of reflecting maybe some of the things that Mona, you talked about in terms of the importance of our mothers also encouraging the daughters to take that advanced math course and maybe not let them off the hook. Like, if you're not going to let your sons off the hook, then don't let your daughters off the hook. But, you know, also about these institutional systems, having more daycare. We already allow women time off the tenure clock in Canada. So I think, you know, talking about the differences between the US and Canada, I think that we are further ahead in a lot of respects. But maybe I'll just say one last thing. And she talked about an analogy with barrels. And if we want to, if we only take the barrel full of white men, and we don't take advantage of the barrels full of women and the barrel full of minorities, we have to dig pretty deep down into the barrel of only white men if we think we can fill all the academic positions or all the senior positions or answer all the really important questions in science if we are only really taking advantage of one barrel. And so it's this idea that, and it's a lovely analogy, I think, because it's visual, where you can think about skimming the tops of all the different barrels and really answering society's questions. And I think really for us to change, we have to do that. And I have to just tell you that I am the mother of 2 white boys. And so I want to keep opportunities open for them as well.
Right. Any more thoughts, Catherine?
I'll say something about perception, and I think Ruby will support me on this. A lot of the perception is that there are no women who ever were in science and engineering, and that's Ruby's job as a history professor in this field, is to say, yes, there were plenty of them, we just never heard about them. So we last year had a workshop called Wise Legacy to look at building some archives of the women in science and engineering in Canada. And, you know, this is something that we can promote and have to keep for younger people to look at, to see that there were skilled people and skilled women in all these fields. They were real trailblazers, like all the people on this panel. And they succeeded. And so it doesn't have to be that difficult that we have to be trailblazers all the time. And part of my chair, what I've done is to just promote the women who are out there who are doing fantastic jobs. So on my website, you'll see lots of features of women in aerospace, women in IT, women in mathematics. So we're just trying to show as many different role models as possible to show younger people that, you know, there's not just one way to be an aerospace engineer or to be a woman in mathematics. There are plenty of examples of women who do fantastic work and very interesting jobs every day. And so the perception is that there's none. You'll talk to hiring committees and they say, well, there were just no women candidates. There were just nobody applied, or there were just no suitable candidates. But if you're actually proactive and go out and look for those people, they do exist. And so that's what I've tried to do through the chair, is just change that perception, to show that there's plenty of people out there. They're all unique in their own way. And I'm happy that my sponsor, Pratt & Whitney, also decided to do that. They just came out with a brand new engine for an aircraft, and they decided to make a video, and they chose Amanda Ennis, who's an engineer, to be the spokesperson for that engine. Now, they could have picked anybody. They could have picked somebody who's not even associated with the company, just a good speaker, but they decided to pick her, and she's the most enthusiastic person in this video, and she actually knows all the engineering of the engine. She did the actual testing of the engine on a 747, where they hang this new engine off the wing and test it. So yeah, I'm really impressed by what they did. It's been encouraging.
That's interesting that you go and recruit, you find the gems and recruit the people. Because part of the problem with perception is also, the media is at fault. Maybe management perception is at fault. There are different facets in society of people in power that maybe portray the wrong image of what it is to be a woman in science. I don't know, Mona, si c'est ton expérience aussi. Hein.
Absolument. Écoutez, la première fois que j'ai été pour faire signer ma demande de subvention chez le doyen, sa secrétaire m'a dit, vous direz à votre patron la prochaine fois d'être un peu plus à l'heure. Donc, c'était pas possible d'imaginer que je pouvais être le patron, puis ça continue à ne pas changer. Mais j'aimerais quand même ajouter à ce qui a été dit que je crois que les femmes et les hommes ont quand même des perceptions différentes de ce qui est important. Et donc, quand je prends juste le domaine de l'ingénierie, le département ou le secteur de génie où il y a le plus de femmes, c'est en génie chemical and biological engineering. Okay, this is the hardest program, actually, the longest program in engineering. So it's very competitive. They're not in it because, they wanted to be in electrical, but are here. No, they're there because they want to be there. Si on regarde la faculté de sciences, la vaste majorité, je crois maintenant c'est peut-être le 2/3 des étudiants des étudiantes à la faculté de sciences sont dans les thématiques de sciences de la vie. Donc la biologie, biopharmaceutique, c'est presque de la chimie, mais en chimie il y a beaucoup moins de femmes proportionnellement que biopharmaceutique. Donc je crois qu'il y a comme institution d'éducation supérieure et probablement même au niveau des écoles, je crois qu'on explique mal les débouchés des divers diplômes à nos étudiantes, à nos jeunes filles. Puis il y a peut-être quelque chose à faire dans ce secteur-là. Je ne sais pas, du point de vue sociologique ou autre, Ruby, si tu es d'accord, là, mais...
En fait, ma collègue Anne Denis et moi et d'autres, on a fait une recherche approfondie dans des facultés de génie au Canada, je ne vais pas les nommer, où c'était très clair que plusieurs des jeunes filles, et je me demande des fois si c'est pas la même chose pour les garçons, mais là je parle des filles, ignoraient vraiment c'était quoi le génie, comme j'ai fait allusion, et à quoi ça pouvait mener. Et c'est une fois qu'elles étaient arrivées sur le campus, dans un programme quelconque, que là, on s'aperçoit que peut-être qu'on ne sait pas trop qu'est-ce qu'on va faire. Donc, et ça revient souvent que cette idée qu'il y a encore une ignorance du génie. Et comme je mentionnais dans la présentation, là, on met l'accent sur le fait que on parle de perception, mais que les jeunes filles veulent travailler au service de la société, améliorer la société, et que le génie, en fait, peut contribuer à cet objectif. Je voudrais juste revenir à ce que Catherine disait par ailleurs au sujet de l'invisibilité des femmes. Ce que je n'ai pas eu le temps de mentionner, c'est qu'il ne faut pas oublier que le fameux rapport du Conseil canadien des académies, là, dont je parlais, sur la recherche, les femmes et la recherche, a été produit suite à ce que moi j'appelle the Summer's Affair Canadian Style. Vous vous souviendrez qu'il y a eu un émoi très profond de la part des femmes lorsqu'on a choisi les premiers titulaires de la chaire d'excellence de recherche du Canada, les CERC, comme on les appelle, as we call them, où il n'y avait pas une seule femme, d'accord, qui était nommée. Et là, on s'est mis à creuser un peu et on s'apercevait qu'il y avait à peine quelques, ou peut-être même pas de candidates féminines qui avaient été sélectionnées pour la compétition. Et ce qui m'a rassurée et encouragée, c'est le tollé de protestation, évidemment, qui a été provoqué par cette découverte de l'invisibilité des femmes encore au 21e siècle, ce qui a mené à ce rapport dont je parlais. Et je me souviens, parce que Mona, on l'a su, c'est qu'on a eu les directives pour faire des efforts, évidemment, très sérieux pour aller chercher des candidates féminines. Alors, c'est un épisode quand même très important, mais qui démontre que les femmes, maintenant, contrairement à peut-être il y a 5 ans, 60 ans, ont réagi. Les médias sociaux aident énormément maintenant. L'utilisation des médias sociaux pour généraliser et répandre la protestation ou l'opposition féroce à ce qu'on vient d'entendre a aidé beaucoup aussi. Alors.
Oui, c'est ce qui est arrivé d'ailleurs avec l'histoire de Tim Hunt. Ça a été tweeté et puis malheureusement la journaliste scientifique qui a tweeté a eu des répercussions au niveau de sa carrière et présentement elle est en arrêt, alors c'est pas encore tout à fait réglé, c'est dommage. Mais ce qui est fantastique, c'est que vous êtes ici, que vous êtes intéressé par cette question et que vous êtes attentif et que vous avez certainement des questions pour nos panélistes. Alors, je vous invite à vous déplacer. On a un microphone ici pour qu'on puisse bien vous entendre clairement. Et aussi, on aimerait peut-être parce qu'on va terminer bientôt, mais y aller vers peut-être des solutions. Là, on essaie d'en parler un peu des problématiques. Quand on est dans la perception, d'identifier les perceptions, c'est difficile d'être conscient des différences, des décalages de perception et d'identifier vraiment les problèmes qui ont mené à ce décalage-là. Mais alors je vous inviterai donc d'y aller, de soit proposer vos solutions si vous en avez, ou de faire des commentaires ou de poser vos questions à nos panélistes qui sont déplacés ici pour partager avec vous et faire avancer avec vous aussi, changer ces chiffres qui sont encore très inégaux. Est-ce que vous avez envie de... Allez-y.
Thank you very much for your insights. It's very, very interesting. I want to make, I guess it's a comment, and I'm not sure exactly how we would begin to address this. So I'm in the Faculty of Medicine, and in the Faculty of Medicine, we talk about the great strides that we've made in terms of admission of women into the programs. But there's also something which, the discussion is around the feminization of medicine. And I think in a lot of the fields in which women have made great strides, it's also been associated with a little bit sort of reduction in the prestige of those fields. And I'm not sure exactly how to explain it or what we would do about fixing it. But it's also been shown, statistics have also shown that salaries have also slowly come down in those fields. And so I'm wondering whether you have any insights as to how we tackle this problem, because I think as women make these advances, we're still going to face the discrimination that exists in terms of the value that we bring to those positions.
I can say this is. It reminds me of a meeting where the entire discussion was what comes first. Is it that once women go into a field that the sort of prestige or importance is viewed as lessened, or is it because the field changes and is no longer viewed as so important, so that women actually get a chance to be in it? So it's an interesting, it's a very interesting question. I don't have an answer to it, but maybe someone else has.
I would say it's a persistent sociological problem that, you know, people know that women are not going to fight back as hard. And so, you know, we have systems in place. For instance, at the university, we are unionized as professors, so we have a union who fights for those things for us. But I don't know, you know, you have probably organizations of family medicine doctors and things like that that can work for you. But generally, yes, you know, women tend to see their contribution through their work as more than just a paycheck, right? Or more than just doing the job to get the paycheck. They have a variety of reasons for doing this work. A lot of them we talked about engineering for serving the world, ESTW. So one thing we try to do is to get women aware of the situation that, you know, you need to negotiate more, for instance. And so we've been running a number of workshops for women in negotiation. There's a good book you can read called Women Don't Ask by Linda Babcock and Sarah Lashiver, where you just, again, try to make women aware of, you know, what the environment's like. All of these things are about coming into an environment that you don't really feel comfortable in because it's been shaped by hundreds or thousands of years of men running those environments. And how do you adapt to those environments? Now, on the one hand, Ruby said, you know, maybe we don't need to be the ones who change to adapt to the environment, but the reality is we do. We'd like to change the environment. Ruby talked about institutional transformation, which is sort of the hallmark of the National Science Foundation in the U.S.'s program for advancing women. They went from a model of investing in single women to more institutions and changing the institution to make it more amenable not just to women, but to everybody, to all sorts of diverse people. So in some ways, it's the places that need to change, the system that needs to change, but also the women need to become aware of, you know, things they're going to have to do even if they're uncomfortable. And through our workshop, what we tell them is maybe uncomfortable the first time, the second time, or the third time, but you get used to it, and then you can do it.
Molly, do you have any suggestion? How we can change those numbers, because there's all the facets of our lives. That there's the career, but also the family, and this change that we've been through, in terms of having access to career in science, they've happened very quickly within one generation, and this without maybe always acknowledging the impact on the other facets of our lives. I mean, on the positive side, many of us here, many of you, I'm sure, would acknowledge that without strong support from your partner, your family, that you wouldn't have gone where you were.
Well, first of all, it's incredibly depressing to hear your story. But hopefully it's not true. I mean, certainly I think anybody who is sick, the first thing they do is want to know somebody who's a doctor, and we're all always sick at some point, right? And so hopefully the perception of that field doesn't change. I think, you know, I'm a woman in science as opposed to a woman who studies women in science. And you know, I think I'm guilty of some of these things. Like when you said, "Oh, women don't ask," I'm like, "Yeah, that was me." You know, when I got I got offered a position at the University of Toronto, I was like, "Yes," and then I'm like, "Shit, I should have asked for that startup package." You know, so there's, you know, I think that is, I see those inherent in myself, and even though I don't think anybody would think of me as, you know, a wallflower or, you know, not expressing my opinion, but there's certainly this idea of standing up and speaking out and carrying your voice is something that I know I've had to do, and it puts me in an uncomfortable position sometimes. So I guess I don't really have an answer, except that we do have to continue to participate in the society that we have made, and continue to really advocate for ourselves. There was an interesting thing about startup packages where, you know, where women got startup packages on average, these are US dollars, not just because our Canadian dollar is so low, but U.S. Statistics, I guess, where on average women's startup package is $350,000, and on average a men's startup package is $879,000, right? So that's more than double, and it's probably partially gender bias, and probably because they asked. So I guess that's just that message of advocating for yourself.
And how can you change that? How can you make the women starting, and maybe we can ask nos boursières ici comment ils envisagent leur premier job. Est-ce que pour elles ça fait partie de leur culture, la négociation de leur salaire? On aimerait vous entendre aussi. We would like to hear from you as well, as how you envisage the future and negotiating your first salary, and is this something that's already ingrained in you? Alicia.
Moi, je peux dire que j'avais le même problème en fait au travail, parce que je me suis rendu compte que mon salaire, dans un moment de ma vie, mon salaire était moins important que l'autre personne qui performait le même travail. Et je suis physicienne, donc j'étais une seule femme. Et il y avait plusieurs raisons pour ça. Donc je me suis dit que je vais négocier. Et c'était très difficile parce que je me suis dit, bon, peut-être il y a raison que j'ai le salaire un peu moins important, parce que les gens qui dépendent de mon travail, qui est peut-être moins glorieux que les autres, ou peut-être justement il y a moins d'argent dans le département. Et à ce moment-là, je demandais mes collègues qui sont hommes, me dire comment vous négociez. C'est quoi votre première phrase quand vous êtes devant votre chef, vous dites je ne suis pas très contente, je ne suis pas parfaitement satisfaite. Et c'est ça, c'est eux qui m'avaient expliqué, et j'ai vu leur attitude qui était complètement différente de la mienne. Ou quand ils disaient que moi j'y vais, et je dis ça, oui, ils ne se sont pas posé question, est-ce que mon travail est au niveau? Non, ils disaient, les autres, ils ont ce niveau, mettons, du salaire. Moi, je devrais aussi. Pourquoi pas? Ce n'était pas une question de confiance, c'était une question de règle. On regarde, c'est comme ça, les autres obtiennent autant, moi aussi. Tandis qu'une femme, et mes collègues, après, je parlais avec d'autres femmes de mes collègues, qui ont eu les mêmes problèmes, mais leur première impression, c'était est-ce que je devrais avoir? Est-ce que j'ai fait le travail qui est aussi bon que les autres aux autres? Non, mais ce n'est pas question, en fait. Est-ce que j'ai répondu aux questions?
Est-ce que ça a marché? Ça a fonctionné?
Oui, ça fonctionne très bien, en fait. Et en fait, à ce moment-là, à cette époque, mon chef, en fait, il était tellement occupé qu'il n'est pas... En fait, il m'avait dit que... En fait, moi, je pensais que je te paye plus. Donc, oui, ça fonctionnait comme ça. Et un autre commentaire je voudrais dire que les femmes sont sous-représentées dans le domaine scientifique, et en particulier en physique. Je pense qu'un élément important qui pourrait renverser cette tendance, c'est l'existence du modèle auquel les jeunes femmes peuvent s'identifier. Et quand on pense au modèle de femmes en physique, on pense à Marie Curie. Et en plus, on ne prononce pas très bien son nom, parce que son vrai nom c'est Marie Skłodowska-Curie. Et l'autre femme, comme Marie Geppert-Meyer, il reste à l'ombre. Et donc je pense qu'il est donc très important de soutenir les femmes scientifiques et highlight their achievements auprès du grand public.
Fantastique, ton message.
J'aimerais peut-être ajouter quelque chose. Il y a une réalité, c'est que les femmes veulent être des femmes et veulent avoir une carrière et une vie de famille ou une vie de femme, peu importe ce qu'elles décident. Puis je crois que ce qui est important, c'est que les femmes réalisent qu'elles peuvent faire ceci, qu'il y a des choix à faire, je veux dire des choix des fois difficiles à différents stades de la vie, et qu'il ne faut pas hésiter de demander à des femmes qu'on voit qui sont un peu plus âgées, qui ont fait des choses. Pas évident qu'on veut être comme elles, mais il ne faut pas que les jeunes filles hésitent à juste avoir du mentorship, à poser des questions, etc. Parce qu'on est toutes passées par des questionnements. Puis je crois que c'est très important, puis ça aide là. Parce qu'il est possible de faire vraiment tout ce qu'on a envie de faire.
Bravo, bon message.
From the Faculty of Sciences, and well, once I decided to count how many female professors we had, and I counted 6, and the vast majority men. So I'm seeing here basically a lot of women, but when we go to the field, we know that we have a lot of professors, they're men. So how can we bring this message to our environment? Because here is a special occasion. We're all here because we want to know more about it, but on our daily environments, how can we take these messages and make them get to the point? Because, well, we're looking for postdoc positions, we're looking for positions at chairs at the university, and we're going to deal with an environment that's basically dominated by men. So how can we take this and show them, well, we're there, we're working with you guys, and we're as good as you are?
I think, if I can just say one thing, I think this is very important what you just said and what we also just heard. I think that the leadership of the faculties and universities need to hear that it's actually important for female students to have role models in front of them, because it will just, put increasing awareness and increasing pressure. So I think, it's a message that needs to get out there. Otherwise, it's only a bunch of us saying it's important to put role models, in front of students and in front of young faculty and so on. So I just encourage you, to voice your thing.
Just add, there are quite a few women professors. Maybe you don't know them sometimes because you take a class and you only see men, or you happen to only get some men in your coursework. But for instance, our computer science department actually has 50% women profs. And does anybody in this room know that? Does anybody know that? Okay, 50%, that's just unbelievable. We are 20% women profs in Faculty of Engineering, which is the highest, I think, in the country. So there are, some real gems of women. You need to seek them out, perhaps. We have meetings once in a while, but they're all super busy people. You just heard Molly's CV. They're very, very busy people, so sometimes you won't see them because they're very busy with other things. And that's why we appreciate events like this one.
Could I just add that I think really what we have to do in our academic institutions and in our corporate environments is actively seek out and hire women. When I was an undergrad at MIT, it was 23% women. So other than being very popular, it was obviously a problem. And what MIT did is they actively pursued high school girls to apply. And then they had special weekends just for the women who were accepted so that they would come. And now it's actually almost, I think, 48% or close to 50%. And I think we, in our Faculty of Applied Science and Engineering at U of T, our dean is a woman, and she's actively encouraging the departments to hire women as well. And so it's an active recruitment. The system isn't just going to change. Nothing just happens. But I think we can actively have a role in changing it.
Fantastic. One more question, and then we have a few minutes for the conclusion.
So hi, my name is Laura Ramuno. I'm a professor in physics. So I just wanted to get back to some comments you made about that you can have it all. And in some sense you can, but in some sense you really can't. And I was told, for example, not too long ago, that I had to choose between family and career. So it's hard to say that that you can't have it all because there are choices to be made, like you mentioned. And the other thing is, as a woman, I still do the majority of family care, and I think that's a really important point.
Yes.
And so it seems like colleagues don't have that burden quite as much as I do, and I would like to get your perspective on how you handle that issue. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
I can start. Maybe we just hide it better, because I would say I do more of the family-related stuff, but I think you really, so something we haven't said is, you really have to marry well.
That's true. That was the conclusion of our last panel last year.
Yeah,
marry well.
Well, it sounds a little bit trite, but what it really means is you need to marry somebody who values your career as much as you value your career. And that is not easy to find. And so, and then you also really need, at least for me, I've had an incredible support system. We live close to my parents, so they've been able to help, and I have to tell you that I have teenage boys, and I still have somebody helping me out full time. So I've made the choice in terms of, lifestyle is to have somebody at home helping cook the meals and cleaning the house, so that I can come here to Ottawa and speak on these amazing panels and spend more time in work. But it's a constant struggle. It's not easy. But if you can find a way to make it all work, it's so rewarding.
I think we've touched.
I have a different opinion.
Different opinion, okay.
Or not the same experience at all. So what I think is you just make it work. You make it work for whatever you want to do. So unfortunately, I went to MIT and Princeton, and I'm surrounded by my best friends and colleagues are all the top people in the world, but I'm not. I'm not in my field the top person in the world. I am in one, perhaps really tiny slice of what I do, but I enjoy what I do day in and day out. So I just make it work. And just like we make things at work, I had lots of things to do today, and I ran over to, be on this panel knowing that I have a lot of other things to do. It's the same at home. I make sure that everything gets done for the kids to a certain extent. They have to take responsibilities for what they're going to do as well. Okay, they're older now, they're not small. But, you find ways to make it work. And the luxury of being an academic is that, you really are your own boss. You're running your own show. It's very flexible, other than the times you have to be in the classroom. So I chose this career because I wanted to have kids, and I have 4 kids. And I wanted to do it, and I did it. And I don't find it a struggle every day. I just make it work.
Well, the engineers, I guess, are better organized, because I found it a struggle too. And I had to have my parents live next to me, and I also chose to have someone, full-time. And when I complained at one point that my salary was all going to the nanny, the question was, okay, would you rather stay home? And the answer was evidently no. So this is, where I'm saying that you have to sometimes make compromises and make choices. So it's, you can end up by having everything you want, but not necessarily all at the same, time. I'm very sorry, that people made you question whether you should, you're able to have both a family and a career. It's unfortunate, and I think it speaks to some, ongoing challenges that we all face. Many women don't want anybody to know that they are pregnant, because then their colleagues will think that they're not serious. It's still ongoing.
Yeah, it's still ongoing. Ruby, have you studied that aspect of the impact of family support, perception also in...
I must say this is something that
it's
I
big.
you down the road, but I must say that what Mona said, I've seen CVs where there is no mention of a maternity leave because the person is afraid that will affect our reading and appreciation of the CV. Ça me désole profondément. quand on est dans l'an 2000, le 21e siècle, qu'on fasse ça encore. Mais je dois avouer que j'ai vu une diminution de cas semblables. Bon. Et l'autre chose, si on fait un petit peu, on va à l'envers des progrès qui ont été faits. Vous savez, en histoire, c'est les mêmes problèmes pour les femmes. Hein? On a des enfants aussi. Et puis, je me souviens d'une collègue, quand je suis arrivée à l'université en 1988, qui cachait même l'existence de ses enfants, qui n'en parlait jamais parce qu'elle avait peur que ses collègues masculins seniors au département pensent que ça va nuire à, évidemment, sa performance. Et ça m'a frappé profondément quand je suis arrivée. Je me dis, c'est incroyable. Elle n'en parlait jamais, jamais. Mais ce que vous allez peut-être remarquer aussi, c'est que je l'ai vécu dans mon département, je suis certaine que ce n'est pas seulement dans celui-là, c'est qu'il y a beaucoup de jeunes hommes qui sont pères et qui parlent de leurs enfants et qui vont dire oh, « il faut que je parte aller le chercher à la garderie ». Bien, ma collègue dont je vous parle, là, il y a 25 ans, n'aurait jamais osé dire « je quitte la Réunion pour aller chercher mes enfants » parce qu'elle avait peur. Alors, je vous compare le before and after, puis pensez à ce que vos collègues masculins aussi, comment eux, ils se comportent.
Oui.
Ils ne sont pas gênés de le dire.
Oui, ça c'était il y a 25 ans, mais c'est encore comme ça maintenant et ça fait partie de la capacité de changer la perception. C'est en projetant la réalité telle qu'elle est. Alors, c'est la fin de notre merveilleuse discussion. Malheureusement, il faut arrêter ici et j'inviterai Virginie pour peut-être un dernier petit mot, si elle le veut, pour conclure. Ou Jean-Christophe aussi, offrez.
Bon, bien, je remercie tout d'abord les panélistes et Véronique qui ont accepté d'ouvrir un peu leur page d'histoire personnelle pour discuter de ce sujet. Je remercie tous les gens qui se sont déplacés, everybody who came here to listen to that topic. I guess there are many more women than men in the room. But I think it opened up a lot of discussions and ideas, or at least an acknowledgement of perceptions and situations in the topic. I don't know if Jean-Christophe, you have anything else to say? No, you don't. Perfect. I noticed in the back of the room one person, since it's 2:45, so we still have a few mini minutes. It's Brad McCabe at the back of the room. He doesn't know anything about this, but he's he's actually in charge of Youth Science Canada. He's one of our partners with our mentoring program. And I don't know, Brad, if you had any perspectives, because you do see young teenagers, boys and girls. You see them in your science fairs that you organize, and you see them in the workshops. Would you have anything that you noticed? I remember last year you said a few words, not to put any pressure. But perhaps it's interesting to see what's the perception also for the younger teenagers.
Well, our organization runs the National Science Fair Network and celebrates the youth of Canada who are working on projects, identifying issues that they find locally, regionally, globally of concern to them, and then they build a solution to it using a science fair project. And we see an interesting split. At the national level, the international level, the students who rise to that level, there's a great equality. In fact, for the last 9 years, we've had more girls participating at the national level than boys. But where we see the inequality is when we get down to the regional level, the 25,000 students who compete at the regional level, or the 500,000 students who are building a project at the school level. So it's how do we impact them? And I know that Molly had made a comment a couple times about having a strong mother who is promoting science and supporting that youth as they're going through it. But it's how do we get the other elements? The other female element in a lot of people's lives is their teacher. So how do we give teachers the support, the skills to teach students and support students as they're going through that process, particularly teachers who haven't come from a science background. K to 8 in particular, you don't need to have science to be a grade 8 teacher. And grade 7 and 8 is such a pivotal moment for youth. They're deciding where they're going to be in terms of high school, what track they're going down. And at grade 12, if you decide you want to go into medicine and you haven't done the prerequisites, it's tough to go back. So from our perspective is, how do we motivate people early, get them excited at grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, give them the support to know that this is an equal path for them, and ensure that they're taking that. And L'Oreal is a great partner in that, and we're trying to do more outreach across the country. And I don't know if you have any other thoughts about how do we get the teachers involved more and give them the skills that we can add into the programs that we're doing.
We have 1 or 2 minutes.
Were you going to say something? Oh, some of the chairs, not my chair particularly, but some of the other chairs across the country, I would say the Atlantic chair, Tamara France Odendahl is working a lot with teachers. So there are some programs where you have academics working with teachers and guidance counselors to make them aware of, what is an engineer, finding the language to explain to younger kids what engineers do, and get them used to doing problems that will lead in that direction. So, good program.
Well, thank you, of course.
I think that I think it is a problem that a lot of the K-8 teachers don't have science backgrounds, because it's hard to get a student excited about science when you don't have any feel for it. But there are, like Let's Talk Science, there are a lot of programs that go out into high schools where scientists or budding scientists are going out into high schools and trying to get, or show people the excitement of what's actually going on in research. And so I think there are more and more programs. We started a program called Research to Reality, which is a social media campaign, and that's not that it's geared to K-8, but it is geared to the general public, to let the public know what is research anyways and why do I care. So it's meant to address the public's perception of what research is. And it is a nationwide waving the Canadian flag of research. And maybe I think more initiatives, more social media initiatives, I think will help engage the public, and inevitably the K-8 and the high school students.
Thank you. So my real last words now would be for the fellows that will be honoring tonight. I think that part of the solution might be to have inspiring role models, and you ladies at the table certainly are, and you certainly will be, and already are. So congratulations to the panelists for your achievements, and to the fellows for your prizes that you will receive tonight. Thank you, everybody. Bonne journée.